It's clear that we need to make affordable housing energy efficient and net zero, especially because we've got looming deadlines ahead of us. Throughout the country, our goal is to be net zero by 2050. In other areas like Greater Manchester, that goal's a lot sooner. It's 2038. So how do we get there? I'm Julia Hatmaker, editor of Place Northwest, and joining me today, I have David Kemp from Turner & Townsend and Sandy Livingstone from Onward Homes, and we're going to be discussing how we actually get to our goals of having affordable homes that are energy efficient and ultimately net zero. So Sandy, why don't you start us off? Where are we at now? How's it looking?
It's improving. I think over the last couple of years, we've started to get a bit of traction. We started to work out how we're going to do things. You can start to see some of it becoming more mainstream. For us, we think we know how we can build zero carbon and use housing, new build housing. We can see some of the pattern. We have retrofitted thousands, tens of thousands of houses across the Northwest. As a housing association network, we're on track to do our first 1,000 by the end of this year. And we're also starting to identify those houses that can't be retrofitted or will never achieve zero carbon and have to be regenerated, so we need to replace them. So I think positive direction of travel, but I think it's the whole thing of looming deadlines for our customers. How do we get to the point where that home is affordable to rent or buy and live in, and how do we hit those targets in Greater Manchester, and how do we accelerate in the back half of this decade to achieve that objective?
Okay, so if we were just going to continue where we're at now, do you guys think we would actually achieve our net zero goal? David?
Well, I'd actually question what the target is we're trying to achieve, because you used the term, Julia, net zero, and in relation to the UK, net zero carbon by 2050 is the legally binding target that we've got to hit. In Greater Manchester, it's not net zero, it's carbon neutrality by 2038, which is something different, to be fair. The definitions around net zero and carbon neutral, net zero is harder. It's all about reduction of energy demand, reduction of carbon as far as practically possible before you start to look at things like offsets and stuff like that. Whereas carbon neutral, you can be carbon neutral tomorrow, but it means, well, it could mean not changing anything at all about what you do as a business. You don't even have to retrofit stuff. You just have to offset or produce enough renewable energy to offset the carbon that energy is generating associated with your current operation. So in that respect, we still have a little bit of uncertainty and confusion in the marketplace, even amongst housing providers, regarding what it is that we need to do and what it is we need to achieve.
Yeah, and I think David's right about confusion about definition. But I think if you go on the basis of, for us, it's what are we doing for our customers? How do we help them? And how do we actually help the community that we're working in? It makes it much easier for us to get an emphasis and and I think one of the things about we will eventually have to eliminate carbon from supply chains, but you need to make a step change before you do the next bit. So it's starting to set a set of steps out to get to the goal that you want that are actually achievable now. And if we don't do that, then in effect we will never actually accelerate enough to achieve the actual the climate change target that we've got. I think so. So I think our thinking is driven by that concept. Rather than, and by doing that, what it's a bit more pragmatic, we think we can get traction. Now, will we achieve what we would like to achieve by the end of the decade unless we accelerate? The answer to the question is no.
Well, David, now that you've poo-pooed all over my 2050, 2038 timeframes, where actually do we want to be then? What is the goal that we should be having?
Oh, crikey. Well, we will have to revert back to 2050. I think we have a legally binding commitment as a country to be net zero carbon by that date, and everybody has a significant part to play within that. And I think it's fair to say the social housing sector can take the impetus, and it can act as that catalyst, as it has done in other areas, in relation to achieving that particular target. If we're looking at it holistically, yes, we're looking at carbon within the supply chain. That is very, very complicated to figure out and assess and equally reduce. The negative impacts of those emissions. It's really, really complicated to respond to that. What is the right target? And I think, to be fair, from a social housing provider perspective, we've got this concept of EPCC, so Energy Performance Certificate rating of C by 2030, is it?
Yeah.
I think, thank you. I did know that. As well as internal targets set by respective housing associations boards. So I think some of the landlords in Greater Manchester are going for EPC C 2030 and zero carbon by 2050, even though the combined authorities set carbon neutrality by 2038 as the date. Even within the different distinct boroughs of Greater Manchester, Manchester City Council has a different target to Greater Manchester, as has Oldham Borough Council. So there is no right or single answer to when do we need to be zero carbon. It'll depend on the context and the specific considerations that organisation faces.
And David's right in that there's this thing about carbon targets that actually we are setting up to be EPCC by 2030. We're also, at the moment, it's 2050 in terms of zero carbon for us. But by doing that, it's that thing of what government does. So the single biggest determining factor for us, what we can control, we can do. So we can deal with 3,500 houses across the northwest that we know about, that we've got the capacity to do. What we don't quite know yet is the rate at which the grid decarbonises and the rate at which the capacity in the grid, electrical grid, increases, because it's that'll determine how quickly we take out gas boilers and replace them with electric heating systems. And it's just starting to line up so that we've done what we can do, but we then make the next switch and the next change in line with when the grid is ready to take it. That's the critical thing for me.
And in that respect, the expectations are that we should be seeing grid decarbonisation by 2030 to 2035. There's something between those lines. There was a report produced not that long ago that said we're on track for that, even with the infrastructure upgrades that are needed by the electrical network. Was it earlier this year that over 50% of all electricity generated in the UK is now renewable, which is a massive step in the right direction.
And if we see that continuing, where more onshore wind farms come in, whether you like them or not, I personally quite like them in the landscape. I'm used to them. They've been there where I used to live for years. So you become used to it. But it's that thing of, if I've got a housing development near Crewe at the moment, new build housing, only a third of that site can be supplied by the grid at the moment with the current infrastructure. So we need the grid to increase so they can build the whole site out without gas boilers, because that's what we would want to do. Putting gas boilers in now is just, it's mad when you think about it.
It's a retrofit for the future. Yeah. Literally, not a retrofit of the future, but something you're going to have to go back and revisit at a later date.
It does sound like it's much more about the direction of travel. Where are we going, and are we actually taking those steps forward, or are we kind of so shell-shocked that we're just staying put, too afraid to actually get something going, or too complacent, I guess is probably a better way of saying it.
And I think what we're relying on is that make a step forward, make a leap, will drive innovation. That human beings are in the centre of where the Industrial Revolution started here. That innovation part of, once you take one step, what you'll find is technology will then make a leap. We'll also understand how we do the next bit. But if you don't take the first leap, you don't get the second one. Because we can already see some of those changes coming. But it's getting them, identifying the right ones and then scaling them is the bit that will come over the next 2 to 3 years. But if we don't make progress in 2 to 3 years, we'll run out of time.
Inertia is a real issue and a very real risk on that front. Doing nothing isn't an option.
So we now know where we want to be, where we are now, where we want to be, and why we want to get there. So now I'd like us to discuss, how do we actually move forward on this journey? The
technology, the systems, the things that will support us to get there are already around. In terms of kit, bells and whistles, heat pumps, ground source, air source, whatever flavour you fancy, solar PV, insulation levels, they're already there already. We've got the tools. It's how we, I suppose, make them work together and how we implement them in a way that the community can be taken with us. Because again, certainly in relation to social housing, this is someone's home. They might not own it in a legal sense, but it's their home, it's their property. If they don't want something to be put into it because they don't know how to work the heat pump, or they think they won't be able to put a hanging basket on the outside of the house because it's got external wall insulation on it, or things of that nature, you're going to get significant reticence. So it's the development of an approach that chimes with your community, chimes with your your tenants, residents, customers, whatever definition you want to use, and then a program of gradual change. There are certain technologies like, again, I'll pick on solar PV, solar photovoltaics. They are, I think it's fair to say, a no regret installation. They can be put on a particular property. They don't require a significant change in behaviour from the occupants of that particular property for them to work, and they generate a saving from day one from point of installation. Other things are a little bit more considered. So in terms of the tech, it's already there. There are some software things that are coming online which are quite interesting. So energy storage solutions, devices that know when the grid is super green and it'll charge a battery or charge a hot water tank at that point in time, or when it makes sense to export energy that's being produced by a property, because it might generate a bit of revenue either for the system owner, whether that's the landlord or the tenant themselves. It'll export instead. And it's all these control mechanisms and balancing things. There are times when, if you're a private customer, your energy provider might pay you for consuming electricity because there's too much. There are incentives, there are payments associated with switching off wind farms, and so curtailment is the technical term. So if there's a way to harness all this stuff through better control and digital systems, and they are emerging, it's making sure that they get put into the mix, into consideration when we're developing retrofit projects at scale.
Now, I want to put a pin in on the future technology side of things. I want us to dig more into that in a moment. But leaning into what we have now, you already mentioned, we've got a lot of the tech that we need. We need to embrace it and bring the community on board, and that's a huge aspect of it. Sandy, do you want to elaborate any more on that?
I think there's always a reticence to new things that we do. If you look at the range of things that we would do, I think we've learned, in the last couple of years, the mix that's appropriate for each house and what works best. If we look at what we've done in North Liverpool, we've actually installed triple glazing, because in those houses, because of the nature of the wall area they've got, that's a better solution than putting PVs in the roof. And it's understanding the mix, but it's also taking your community with you from the beginning. It's about making it clear that there is a benefit to them, because we will disrupt their lives as we go in and do the work, but we take them through. We've started with trying having show homes. So for that community, there's 400 houses in North Liverpool, there's a show home, so they can go and feel and touch and see it. We can also talk them through the benefits for them, and we can talk them through the process about how it will be done, who they will see, who will come in. We employed tenant liaison officers. We've got our own staff are deployed on site with the contractors. And it's that thing of taking the people with you and giving them the output. And when they see the final product where the houses actually look phenomenally different to the ones that we had, they look a lot better. Visually, they're much more striking and appealing. And inside the houses, they're much more comfortable. But you have to show people to get them to go with you. I think it's a lesson that we might have forgotten it from the past, but I think that's the truest thing to say.
If I can pick up on something you said there, Sandy, which is equally really important and very remiss of me not to mention earlier, that's understanding your stock. Yeah. So there isn't a single solution or one-size-fits-all approach to domestic retrofit. It depends, and this is reflected in PAS 2035, one of the standards that social housing retrofit aspires to deliver against. The retrofit has to be appropriate for the occupant. It's got to be appropriate for the building owner if that's different. It's got to be within budget and so on and so forth. But it's got to be right for that house, for that particular property. So in some cases, this concept of, we'll just EWI everything. If the windows are that massive that in actual fact, it makes more sense to triple glaze rather than externally or internally insulate, and it's more cost effective to do so. That's the right measure for that particular property. That's the right measure for that estate.
And one of the other things we found by doing this, some of our older housing is not as well built as you might think. By doing this piece of work and being very specific about what that property needs, we're actually taking out quite a lot of the maintenance issues that we get. So our customers get less water penetration through the roof because we've redesigned the way the roof works. So there are bigger things in this for us that we need to be cognizant of, because it's that thing, how do you pay for all this? Well, if you think slightly more widely and laterally, you'll find that this is much more affordable than you think it is.
Explain, Sandy.
Well, what we're actually doing is we're taking out defects in the original building. So that means that our maintenance costs in the longer term reduce. So you basically got a spend to save situation going on. And for our customers, they're less likely to get things like damp and mould in the property because we've ventilated it and we've insulated it. So that property in itself is now warmer and drier. And that's one of the biggest challenges we have in this country. And the other need to do this is our housing stock is old and it's not very thermally efficient. And that's why we get a lot of these problems in our properties.
So it's affordable because you're tackling so many
Yes.
different problems all in one go.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I do want to touch on funding a little bit because, Sandy, you did mention it is expensive.
Yes.
But there are government grants, I believe, to help out with this kind of thing.
So the funding is available. It's been available for the last 2 years. I think the advantage of government has seen the benefit of that. It is also now unleashing a 3-year funding round. So the grant costs us on average about £30,000 per property to do a retrofit. The grant funding in the past has been about 10 grand. Right, so the other 20 grand we find. But we've fortunately as a business got the financial capacity to do some of that. We're fortunate I've been given a gift of the ability to retrofit about 3,500 houses. The government will give longer term funding now of 3 years. What that allows us to do is to look much more comprehensively. So we can now look at 2,000 properties and then ask government for that funding. That makes a big difference to scaling up capacity because we know for 3 years what we're going to do. Our customers know the benefits, but the industry gets a message of this is a big programme now. So I think what I would say is government's listened. They've got the idea of longer term funding is better, and we're starting to see the benefit of that. Now, clearly my ideal situation is for any government, whatever they are, 5 to 10 year funding would be fantastic. But if you don't ask, you don't get.
Shyburne's getting out. Yeah. Well, I think to be fair, government funding is great. It's brilliant. There is an argument for retrofit regardless of any available cash. And we've talked about the moral imperative. We've talked about the responsibility that the social housing sector has for its tenants. I like the way that you described the way that retrofit was actually improving your long-term maintenance program. At the end of the day, retrofit shouldn't be and isn't a standalone thing. If it's incorporated within a 30-year asset management plan, if you know that you're going to be doing the roof at this point, well, why wouldn't you increase the insulation when you re-roof the thing? Why wouldn't you fix that defect when you go out and do the windows, and so on and so forth? When it's viewed in that respect, the financial argument, it's not viewed as, it's 40 grand extra to do this. It's a slight uplift perhaps, but there's a while you were there cost saving as well, which negates some of that initial cost.
And I think that's a fair comment. There is a moral imperative to do it. That I'd just slightly change the wording and see it as refurbishment rather than retrofit. That's the way we probably see it. And one of the things that we found about doing it is in the communities where we've done it at scale, there's a social value comes out of it. The actual community lifts. All of a sudden that people see us investing in the area. And then some of the more difficult problems in that community start to get tackled. So it almost gives you a bit of regeneration in terms of community cohesion, taking a bit of pride, because you're giving it such a scale of impact that we found in areas that we've done it that all of a sudden we're managing to pull together social value investment programs with the council, the local community groups and other housing associations that makes a difference in that area because it's getting more than just that refurbish and retrofit. So I think David's right, there's more of an imperative than just seeing it as something you should do.
Well, yeah, and there are equally cashable benefits associated with that. So we're aware of some larger financial institutions that would bankroll social housing providers. They're offering preferential rates on loans. And we know when a landlord's refinancing its loan book, if that landlord's got a credible plan to achieve net zero, zero carbon, whatever the appropriate target is, that chimes and aligns with the financial institution's own carbon reduction targets and objectives. So rather than paying, 5%, whatever the going rate is for a couple £100 million off NatWest or TSB or what have you, 0.5% on that because you as a borrower are committed to this particular journey does add up to quite a chunk of change. And equally, I suppose some of those maintenance benefits, because we've addressed damp and mold within that property, there aren't those reactive calls to the mold squad that goes out and bleaches stuff, 3 times a week or all right, being deliberately provocative. But in many cases, undertake repeat visits to individual properties. These all add up in terms of cashable savings. So regardless of free money that may or may not come from whichever government's in power of the day, there is financial sense in doing this.
So I've been taking notes this whole time, and here's my brief recap. You guys let me know if I've missed anything about how we're going to get to our EPC and net zero goals. We are going to acquire data. We are going to assemble all the data imaginable about our estate, where we're at, so we can actually have an educated plan of action going ahead. We are going to embrace the communities that we're working with. We're going to bring them on board. And part of that is going to be showing and not just telling. We're going to let them see the benefits rather than just having to listen to us tell them what it is. We're going to embrace the existing technology that, that's already there and utilize that the best we can. And we'll be able to do that because we've got all the data. And what is more, we're going to be focused on doing this holistically and not just letting it be a parachute in, fix one thing, call it done. It's really looking at how we can be using refurbishment to improve all sorts of aspects of these homes. And we're going to focus and keep our mind focused on doing this at scale in a long-term investment. Is there anything I've missed, guys?
I think I say, should we just go now?
Yeah, an excellent action plan then. Everyone else take note. All right, so now we've heard a little bit about how we're going to get to our net zero and EPC goals. Let's look towards the future. I want to know, what is on your wish list, guys? What would make this delivery aspect of things so much easier? David, you've already touched on some future tech that you'd like to see in terms of having more control over the actual controls of energy flow. Sandy, what kind of tech would you like to see? Or we can look beyond tech.
Well, so what I would love to see is that the innovation part, because one of the really interesting parts of this is seeing how things innovate and change. So I think we will see better battery technology. We will see things like photovoltaics built into roof tiles. We will see products that the insulation that you need to put on a wall to make it better thermally is a lot thinner than it's been in the past. We'll also see some things about smart wall type of controls where the actual property starts to learn how you live in it. So it switches off and on the heating depending on how you use the building. And it does that clever thing of it's where the technology takes you in terms of your electric car becomes part of your battery storage. These things they're not science fiction, they are science fact. It's about that and scaling that industrial might to actually make them mainstream. And I don't think we're far off. I think it's about the next 5 years we'll see it. But one of the other things that really excites me, because we've got lots of older buildings, and that concept, not leaving anybody behind because it's too hard, is how you tackle a 200-year-old Georgian property, townhouse, right, with big windows, high ceilings. How do you deal with that? So there are some products starting to come in about, that's where the thinner insulation comes. There's a thing called a flutter shutter, which is a type of blind that comes down and deals with the fact you've got a very small, thin window. We've also got things like air bricks that start to become, which is about ventilating underfloor areas in a property that actually are sensitive, so they'll shut off and shut on depending on what moisture's in the property. So you're not losing as much heat. Those things start to give me hope that for some of those houses with a lot of our customers live in, particularly in Liverpool, how I could actually tackle them and give them something that gives them the benefit the other customers get, and also deals with that thing of we're doing a holistic refurbishment of that property. Tackle it, and it's good for another 100 years. But that's the really exciting part, because that's the really challenging thing to do.
And I have to say, just to kind of interject here a little bit with my own opinions, which I'm allowed to do every now and then, but the thing I'm excited about, all that technology you mentioned, and David, what you were talking earlier about with air source heat pumps and things like that, the thing that excites me is that as we move forward in the future, all of that's going to get cheaper and cheaper. I mean, we just look at our cell phones now, and they are essentially personal computers. And, 20 years ago, that would have been so incredibly expensive. And now you can get a phone for like £500. It won't be the world's best iPhone, but it'll be a good smartphone. And just seeing how things are going to become more affordable, which will help with the scale up delivery, which you were mentioning is so important.
And yeah, you picked on it there, Julia, and that ties in with the collaboration, the collaborative procurement and all that kind of stuff that Sandy mentioned a second ago. I think in terms of what I would like to see, all these technologies, yes, they're refinements, they're improvements, and they're integration kit and so on and so forth, software, that is coming. It is science fact, again, to use Sandy's phrase. The thing that I think I really would like to see is true collaboration and true partnership working at scale. So what we have seen historically, and I think to be fair, Greater Manchester's pretty good at this. No favouritism or anything like that, but I'm based in the Manchester office and I've worked with Sandy and his colleagues on the Greater Manchester housing providers for some time. But yeah, as a group of landlords, they work collaboratively in the truer sense of the word. We have seen in other parts of the country, collaborative procurement exercise where it's just effectively pilot high and sell it cheap. And there isn't any consideration to how then those members of that consortium go to market. So if everybody is going to market for the same product from the same installers at the same time, you do get pinch points, you do get capacity constraints within supply chain, and you get inflationary bubbles, real high peaks. Whereas if by working in partnership and collaboratively, you can develop amongst 4, 5, 6, however many landlords there are in that consortium, a really long-term considered delivery plan, that's where supply chain have got, right, I know where I'm going, I know what I've got to do over a long period of time, I will invest in skills, I will invest in people, I will place that flaming big order, I did nearly swear, for heat pumps, and the cost can come down over time. And then you really start to realise the benefits of working in partnership. We're not there yet, I think, across the sector as a whole.
And I think that's a fair comment. What we've got in the Northwest is the ability to collaborate through the devolution. So we are used to working together in Greater Manchester. I see the same thing in Liverpool City region. So it's using that devolution power and that ability to convene by those devolved authorities to work with us to achieve this, because that's where the scale will come. Because we're not looking at, so I might look at 2,000 homes. Across the Northwest, it could be 50 to 60,000. That's a significant chunk going to market. And it's been about clever. It's not about reinventing the wheel. These vehicles and bodies exist already to do this. So rather than try and create your own or create something new, use what's there. Just why would we do anything else?
And to be fair, one of the programs that I'm responsible for within Turner and Townsend, something called RISE, Retrofit Information Support and Expertise. That is, and I can say this one, it is funded by the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. And its entire purpose is to support the sector, build capability and capacity so that they can deliver ambitious but inherently deliverable retrofit programs. So regardless of whether or not you're in a combined authority area that's benefiting from devolution, if you are an interested landlord and you recognise your own shortcomings perhaps, or you recognise that others are doing something better than you in certain areas, one of the things that the RISE support service is offering is specific stuff around consortia forming, so we can help organisations that want to develop and deliver a big old retrofit programme. These are the people in your area that you might want to talk to. These are the people that want to get on board and complement the areas that perhaps you're not as developed in. They're smashing it over there. Why don't you guys work together? So that when the market is ready to go for a retrofit program, we've got these credible consortiums that deliver economies of scale and efficiencies for the public purse.
So when it comes to what's on our wish list then, so it sounds like we want some of the technology that Sandy mentioned. We want to work together and have these bigger groups where everyone's actually collaborating, sharing information and planning their process when it comes to procurement, etc., to kind of get the best possible deal for the people that they're going to be helping out in the end. Is there anything else on our wish list? Sandy, I know you want free money from the government for 5 to 10 years, but anything else?
I think what we want is whatever government we have, see it as a long-term objective. Don't step away from it. Don't change. See the target as something that you really want to move the country towards because of the benefits it will actually gain. It won't cost us because of the benefits we actually get out of the back end. And be brave and be bold, because I think that's what we will have to be to tackle this. So that's the other thing I would like, is sustain the funding. We can come in behind it, lay out the path, and we will follow. But I think that's the big thing that if you ask me for my Christmas wish, that'd be it.
David, what's on your Christmas wish?
Recognising that retrofit is asset management. That's all it is. It's good asset management. Point one. Point two is have that plan. Understand your stock, understand your communities, and develop solutions that fit both. And the third one would be to engage with retrofit information support and expertise. Engage with RISE. We are a completely free service funded by the Department for Energy Security Net Zero, and we're here to help, regardless of scale or size.
And I think that point David makes about don't see retrofit as something separate, see it as simply part of what you do. So that flip from use the word refurbishment rather than retrofit, it simply becomes part of the investment we make, rather than it has tended to be a bit of a separate stream, I think, until now. But I think the fact that we're doing more of it, it will become just part of the job that we do. I think that's a key takeaway.
There is one more, and it takes us right back to the beginning, and that's take the first step. Don't wait for the silver bullet, because you will always be waiting.
That's fantastic. And some really good, mission statements there. Take the first step, be bold, be brave, and commit. That was kind of the overarching message that I've taken away. Well, I'm feeling quite optimistic about the future. Should I be?
Yes.
Okay, good. Glad to hear it. Thank you guys so much for joining me on the podcast. And thank you for listening. If you want to learn more about Onward Homes, check out onward.co.uk. And if you want to know more about the built environment in the northwest of England and North Wales, check out placenorthwest.co.uk. And what is more, if you liked today's podcast, and I'm sure you did, don't miss a single one of our episodes. You can find Place Podcasts on YouTube. You can find it on Apple Podcasts and wherever you listen to your podcast. I'm Julia Hatmaker. Have a great rest of your day.